When a Mongol army breached the walls of a city, the battle was never the end. It was only the beginning. The survivors, especially women, were rounded up in full view of their neighbors, bound with strips of rawhide that cut into their wrists and ankles. Some were marked with black charcoal symbols to show which soldier had claimed them, as if they were livestock. Others were driven barefoot over the smoldering wreckage of their own homes. And what followed, what was done to them in the hours, days, and weeks after, was worse than the warnings anyone had ever whispered, worse than rumor, worse than nightmare. Picture this. You stand in the ashes of your home. The morning sun is dimmed by smoke rising in thin columns from broken rooftops. The air is thick with the acrid smell of scorched grain, burnt timber, and blood. Shards of pottery crunch beneath your bare feet. A toppled cart blocks the way ahead. Somewhere nearby, a child sobs, the sound smothered by the eerie stillness that has fallen across the city. And then they appear, mounted warriors in fur-lined armor darkened by travel and war. Their movements are not chaotic. There's no drunken shouting, no frenzied looting. Every step, every gesture, every look, calculated. You realize at once, these are not looters. They are conquerors. They have come with a plan. For years you had heard stories about them in whispers. Armies that seemed to appear from nowhere, striking like lightning across the plains. Cities that fell in days. Entire populations erased. Those stories had always sounded like exaggerations, and yet, now you stand among ruins that prove the truth is worse, because what the stories never captured was how precise the cruelty would be. How cold, how systematic. The Mongols had perfected the art of conquest. Their speed on the battlefield was unmatched, but it was the swiftness with which they broke the survivors that set them apart. For women, survival wasn't random chance. It was a process, executed step by step, like a ritual. This was cruelty not as impulse, but as strategy. It was psychological warfare wielded with the precision of a blade. And the message it sent spread faster than their horses could ride. Resist us, and we will not only kill you, we will unmake you. This reputation meant the Mongols didn't need to fight every city. Many surrendered the moment their banners appeared on the horizon, but those who refused, the cities that dared resist, were turned into warnings. Warnings like the one unfolding around you now. The mounted soldiers dismount. They fan out in eerie coordination, their boots crunching over the rubble-strewn streets. Their eyes scan the doorways and alleys. Some carry ropes, some carry torches. The first stage of your city's fate begins. To understand it, you have to understand them. The Mongols were not born an empire. They began as scattered tribes across the vast steppe of Central Asia. Harsh land, fierce winters, endless movement. Survival demanded mastery of the horse and bow from childhood. Rival clans fought over grazing land and herds, bound loosely by seasonal migrations and clan loyalty. Out of this brutal crucible rose a man named Temujin. He united the tribes through ruthless discipline and unshakable charisma, offering loyalty to those who followed him and annihilation to those who resisted. When he became Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the foundations of the most fearsome war machine in history were laid. The Mongol army was unlike anything the world had faced. Every warrior was an expert rider and archer, able to shoot accurately while galloping at full speed. They could cover over 100 kilometers in a single day, striking deep into enemy territory before defenders could even organize. They traveled with their herds instead of supply wagons, making them nearly impossible to starve or outmaneuver. But their greatest weapon was not speed or stamina. It was fear. They made examples of those who resisted so horrifying that entire kingdoms surrendered without a fight. The terror of their reputation reached further than their arrows, and women, especially, became central to that strategy. Because what was done to the women of a city after conquest was never hidden. Survivors were deliberately left alive to tell the tale. They became the Mongols' living messengers, spreading terror to the next city before the army even arrived. Your city has now joined that list, and as the horns sound through the ruins, the captives are herded into the streets. The first stage is not slaughter, it is separation. The city has fallen, the walls, the gates, the marketplace, everything you knew belongs to someone else now. And the Mongols waste no time in showing it. The first blow isn't to your body, it's to your identity. Flags bearing your ruler's colors are ripped down, replaced with stark black banners. Palaces, temples, and markets are seized within minutes, as if the soldiers had memorized every street before arriving. Resistance in these final moments is punished immediately, cut down in the open, left sprawled on the stones as an example. Then comes the sound, not drunken singing or chaotic looting, but rhythm. Horns and drums rising and falling in deliberate patterns. The beat echoes through the streets, a signal to the soldiers, but also to the survivors. Your city is no longer yours. Every thrum of the drum drills that truth deeper into your chest. The conquered are then forced to watch their own defeat paraded before them. Wounded defenders, once proud armored men, are marched through the main thoroughfare, stripped, bloodied, their heads lowered. It isn't to honor their bravery, it's to show you that if they were powerless, you are less than nothing. Any last pockets of armed men are hunted down with precision. By the time the rhythm fades, only the unarmed remain, the helpless. But the Mongols' cruelty is not confined to the moment. It is designed to spread. They allow some survivors to flee, pushing them deliberately out of the gates. They carry with them more than scars. They carry the story. Word of what happened here will reach the next town before the Mongols themselves arrive. Fear will do half the work of conquest before an arrow is loosed. By now, the city doesn't even feel like home. The streets are the same, but they have been emptied of meaning. The walls that once protected you now cage you. Even the air feels stolen. And then the next stage begins. Separation. This is no chaotic rush of looters. It is a rehearsed performance, carried out with the calm of men saddling their horses. Families are driven into open squares or along the wide roads. Soldiers shout commands in a tongue you don't understand, but the message is clear enough. You are being herded. The first to be singled out are the men of fighting age. If you are injured, you die quickly, often right there in front of everyone. The healthy are bound together in groups, 10, 20 at a time, and marched away. They are not destined for slavery. The Mongols know better than to keep potential rebels alive. Some will be worked briefly, driven to exhaustion for a few days of labor before being executed. A final use, then disposal. Older men, boys too young to fight, and male elders face uncertain fates, sometimes spared, sometimes cut down, depending on the mood of the commanders or the scarcity of resources. Then the women, this stage is executed with chilling efficiency. Mounted officers survey the crowd as though they are inspecting livestock. They look for youth, for strength, for usefulness. Those who meet the standard are pulled aside. Some will be sent with the army, taken as spoils of war. Others are marked for servitude in the conquered territory. Mothers clutching infants are sometimes spared, if the children are seen as valuable later. If not, their cries are silenced in an instant. It happens so quickly, you barely understand what you've witnessed. One gesture, one barked order, and families that had stood together for generations are dissolved in seconds. The sound of protest rises, but the answer is the hiss of a drawn bowstring or the cold edge of steel. Within hours, the entire social fabric of the city has been torn apart. Fathers separated from sons, husbands from wives, children screaming for mothers who will never return. When the process is complete, what stands before the Mongols is no longer a community. It is a collection of captives, fragmented, leaderless, stripped of every bond that once gave them strength. And for the chosen women, the ordeal is only just beginning. Their journey has not yet started. but already the world they belong to is gone. The soldiers begin to move them out of the city, and the march, the display of power meant for every eye that sees it, begins. The sorting is finished, families shattered, the strong executed, the helpless scattered. Now comes the march. The chosen women, along with a few young boys and artisans with rare skills, are pushed into a column. Mounted soldiers surround them, iron-faced, their horses pacing steadily. The fires of your city still smolder behind you, but there's no time to look back. The column begins moving before the embers die. The march itself is not just transportation. It is theater. The Mongols make sure you are paraded along well-traveled routes, through villages and settlements still untouched by conquest. Every passerby sees the captives, bound and walking in silence, guarded by disciplined riders. They see what happens when a city resists. The Mongols don't need interpreters. The message carries itself: resist, and this will be you. Those who stumble are dealt with instantly. A lagging step, a collapse from exhaustion. Punished with a blade, quick and merciless. Corpses are left where they fall, silent reminders to the rest of the column. Keep walking. Hour after hour, mile after mile, the survivors learn that time itself is now an enemy. Every step takes them farther from their homes, farther from the possibility of return. Their identities peel away with the dust on the road, and as the march drags on, the reality settles in. Survival is no mercy. It is only a delay. When the column finally halts, it is not for rest. It is for allocation. The captives are gathered into a camp or a secure settlement under Mongol control. Here, the next phase begins, deciding their fates. The women are inspected once again, but now the scrutiny is sharper. Senior commanders oversee the process, flanked by guards. The most prized are chosen first, young, unscarred, physically strong. Some are claimed by officers outright. Others are set aside as rewards for soldiers whose loyalty must be maintained. The Mongols understood that victory did not rest only on horses and bows. It rested on keeping their armies loyal and motivated. Promises of gold and horses mattered, but so did promises of flesh. The allocation does not end with the army. Many women are sent into the vast, sprawling territories of the empire. Skilled women, spinners, weavers, cooks, performers, are scattered into noble households or labor camps. Their talents consumed by families they do not know, in lands they cannot escape. For those women, survival meant assimilation into a life of endless servitude. They were watched constantly. Any attempt to resist, an insult, a refusal, a whispered plan to escape, could mean immediate execution. Punishments were swift, public, and meant to terrorize the rest. For others, fate meant being passed like objects between masters, traded across the empire like livestock. A woman could serve one household for years, only to be gifted away in a political marriage or alliance. Her identity erased, replaced with whatever role her captors required. What's most chilling is how deliberate it all was. This was not random cruelty, not drunken violence. It was a system designed to extract labor, loyalty, and fear from conquered populations long after the battle was over. And for those who had survived the siege, the march, and the allocation, there was still one final stage: the destruction of everything they once belonged to. The Mongols did not merely capture cities. They erased them. Temples were stripped and desecrated, marketplaces burned, fortifications dismantled so they could never be rebuilt, grain stores destroyed or given to Mongol herds, wells fouled with corpses and waste. It was not rage, it was strategy. A city that no longer existed could never rebel. And so, even as the women were scattered into bondage, their city, their past, their culture, their entire identity, was being erased from the map. The final stage of conquest was not about people, it was about memory. Once the captives were divided and the women carried off, the Mongols turned back to the city itself. What remained of your world was systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but dust. Fortifications were pulled apart stone by stone. Gates burned, towers toppled. Even the breaches the Mongols had carved during the siege were widened afterward, making sure no wall could ever stand again. Temples and shrines, once the heart of your community, were looted and desecrated. Sacred icons defiled, sanctuaries burned. The destruction was more than theft. It was a severing of faith, a message carved into the soul of the survivors. Even your gods cannot protect you. Markets and storehouses, the lifeblood of any city, were reduced to ashes. Grain was destroyed, water supplies poisoned, irrigation canals collapsed. Without food or water, even stragglers who managed to hide during the siege would wither within days. Sometimes the Mongols altered the land itself, rivers diverted, wells filled with rubble, fields churned into wasteland. If the city sat on a trade route, the Mongols would redirect commerce to their own settlements nearby, ensuring that wealth flowed only into their hands. What remained was not ruin, it was absence. The streets where children once played, where neighbors traded, where festivals rang out with music and laughter, silent. The city became a scar, erased so completely that nature itself would eventually reclaim it, grass growing where marketplaces once stood. But the people who had lived there, scattered, absorbed, erased from history. Their only trace carried in whispers. Whispers the Mongols wanted to spread, because destruction was not the end of conquest. It was the beginning of legend. The Mongols knew fear could travel faster than an army. Survivors, intentionally released, became messengers. Their stories, heavy with horror, galloped across the world quicker than horses could ride, and each retelling exaggerated the terror, until the Mongol name itself was enough to open city gates without a fight. That was the genius and the cruelty of their method. They did not need to destroy every city. The fate of one erased settlement could silence 10 others. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, this strategy allowed the Mongols to carve out the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen. From the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Eastern Europe, kingdoms fell before them, not just because of the arrow or the horse or the bow, but because of the promise that resistance meant annihilation. For the women taken, their lives became threads woven into the empire's fabric. Some bore children who would grow up knowing only the steppe is home. Others vanished into far-flung territories, never to be heard from again. Their names erased, their identities dissolved, their fates sealed in silence. Your city, its people, its culture, its memory, joins the countless others that no longer exist. Not just conquered, not just defeated, erased. And this was the true power of the Mongols. Not their speed, not their discipline, not even their weapons, but their ability to remove entire worlds from history itself. The fires have burned out now. The smoke has cleared. The Mongols are gone, already on the horizon, moving toward their next conquest. And you exist only in memory, a story whispered by survivors, carried as a warning. A warning that was so effective, it outlived the empire itself.